Hello and welcome. Today I want to speak about a common misconception that I see in the spiritual path and in the paths of meditation. And it's this common idea that the final goal is transcendence. Final goal is that we need to recognize something that is far beyond and then stay merged with that far beyond. Like this idea that we need to ascend into the heavens, into some stratospheric chakra up there somewhere, and then when we do that, then we'll be free, permanently free. This is absolutely not true, because that's dualistic, to think that we can just escape our way to freedom. Because it is said that enlightenment is the recognition of the nature of reality, and that in that recognition of that truth, we become free or liberated. Eventually. Now, here's the problem. Here's the logical conundrum we run into with this transcendence stuff. Transcendence is, by definition, dualistic. It requires a self to transcend something else. Something is transcending. It's like going away from everything else, but that doesn't make the everything else go away. You see, sure, maybe we escape into some samadhi state or some transcendent witness state or something like this. In the approach that I'm offering here, that is only a stage. It's not a final liberation at all, because those states can come and go. Even if the witness state becomes permanent, it still is dualistic. There's something over here witnessing something else. There's the witnessing that is the emptiness, that is observing the everythingness. But reality is undivided. It's not divided. Our awakening has to be radically inclusive of everything. Our whole experience, our whole human experience, our whole body experience. It's not about escaping the body or, fleeing into the light or the emptiness. But there's common misconceptions that is what it's about. And these are wrong ideas that I think are fooling people. They're fooling people into thinking that escaping is the way to freedom. But if we're not free to live, if we're not free to have all of the experiences we're having, including addressing that which is unresolved in us or that which is dark within us, then we're not free. Addressing it doesn't mean indulging in it or becoming fixated in it or stuck in it somehow. What it means is ultimately we can just face it and to see through it and to transform it, to use it as the fuel for transformation. If we include the whole of our experience, it means all the good, all the bad. We don't get to escape any of that. But the suffering comes from resisting that or from attaching to anything in our experience, whether good or bad, identifying too deeply with it. If we're going to live an awakening and be free in our life, we have to be embodied. But we can't transcend our way to embodiment. That is a contradiction. Transcendence is one movement. It's waking up. What about waking down? Waking down, bringing that awakeness into our life, here and now, so that we can live in accord with the spontaneous flow of the now, of creation, of reality, So transcendence, it sounds like a neat thing, sounds very lofty and like it's very final and very supreme and like it's a very high state. But here's the thing, high and low states of consciousness, they're just states of consciousness. They're just movements within consciousness, within awareness, within our experience. What if suffering was transformed and mitigated by bringing the awakeness to it, to liberate it? You might come back and say, well, yeah, but the true nature of reality is consciousness, so, it's emptiness, so wouldn't we want to wake up to that? Yeah, and that's an ultimate truth. But what if the relative truth is that we have all kinds of human hang-ups that we're avoiding, that we're bypassing? Ultimate truths don't cancel out relative truths. What's more powerful is to bring the two together, not to flee into the awakeness or into the emptiness, but to use the emptiness and the awakeness toward that which is unresolved, that which is hanging us up, that which is dark or untransformed in our life. That's how we embody. We have to be willing to fill out the shoes of our humanity. That's why they call it the path, because we have to walk it. We have to walk it. And so the realizing is the waking up. The walking it is the waking down. We have to really be willing to stay rooted in our humanity if we're going to do this, because the awakening process doesn't make us less human, let me tell you. If it's genuine, it doesn't allow us to escape it. It encourages us actually to embrace our full experience of being a human being There's no problem whatsoever with being a human being in awakening, because that's part of the undivided reality too. A beach has no problem with sandcastles on it. It's all sand. It's all going to get washed away. It's all going to get transformed until the next time. So really it's the waking up part, the transcendent part. That's just part of, recognizing, okay, this is what consciousness is, but realizing the nature of it, that's just seeing it. But the being it, that's when we realize it's really undivided. There's no boundary, right? There's no boundary between that and our humanity. It all gets included, and it's all unconditional. It's all allowed to exist equally, because there's no hierarchy in undivided reality. And so what we find is this very boundless love. And then we're allowed to see ourselves fully and see how it is that we are still hanging on, and transform that so that what was once energy made up of hanging on and resisting can become an expression of the undivided wholeness. And that's a much more embodied awakening. That's a much more free to live in the world kind of an awakening, rather than just hiding in some state of mind or some transcendent emptiness. But we have to surrender. We have to surrender the self that is trying to transcend. The self that is transcended has to be faced and included. If we're to perceive the oneness, there can still be a self there that is one with everything. But ultimately, even that self will fall away, leaving just the ground of being, the ground of undivided wholeness, spontaneously self-organizing itself, dynamically animating everything. What an amazing truth that we get to be part of that. But you see, the thing is, we're so free. We're so free that we're even allowed to be free enough to be ignorant, to be in illusion. We're so free that we're actually allowed to be deluded. And we're also free to become liberated if we are really earnest about the truth. But you see, you don't get the truth of transcendence or bliss or all the good things we talk about in awakening processes. We don't get all of that without the polarity. And what's the polarity? Well, the polarity is facing we awaken to our true nature, but we also awaken to what is unresolved, what is all of our shadows. And when both of those sides of the coin happen, that's when we can kind of awaken more completely. And I use the term completely loosely because completeness is always here and now. It's always spontaneously unfolding. And so there isn't like a line in the sand where, okay, now I'm awakened. It's more like there's only now. And when we live now, we become an expression of that freedom, of that perfect true nature, And eventually it becomes embodied. Eventually it starts to permeate through our whole system. So transcendence is just part of the path. Even oneness, like I said, is part of the path, because oneness, is different from non-duality or non-division or undividedness, because oneness, it's like we're still being one. We're still at one with everything. Undividedness is a different thing altogether. It's self that makes transcendence, or that makes oneness possible. When even that self falls apart. These two states are of transcendence and oneness. These are non-egoic states. They're not no-self states. There can still be a conglomeration of karma frozen in the subtle body that allows us to still feel separate, or to still feel like a self, even if it's a very connected to everything self, like in oneness. And we may see in transcendence or feel very vast and very empty, but there's still like this subtle divide between the witness and everything, and there's still kind of there's in oneness it's a little different, because there's a self that feels profoundly connected to everything, But in the no self state, in true non-division, it's a different thing, because the self that feels connected to everything, even that is gone. And so that state is it feels more grounded, it feels more spontaneous, it feels way less self-referential. There's no self-referencing going on in that state anymore. There's just the spontaneous unfolding of reality. And that's kind of exciting, because we don't really know what's ever going to happen. We're free of needing to know that in that state. And when that self falls away, that's a permanent shift. And that's the beginning of liberation. Really, we have to be embodied if we're going to really become free. Otherwise, we're just hiding in different states. You know, we're hiding in oneness, we're hiding in transcendence, we're hiding in bliss, we're hiding in samadhi, we're hiding in altered states. And none of that is really liberation. Those are just various states or their stages of awakening, really. They're not quite the same as liberation, though. They're somewhat liberated, but they're not full. Full liberation is non-dual. And it's when it's more of a, like they call it, a gut level awakening in Zen. And this is much more rare. It gets right to the somatic roots, because you have to face all your shadows to awaken to that level. You have to be willing to go there, and if you're not willing to go there, you don't just get these freebies that you get with transcendence, where you can just kind of transcend the ego. You know, you can look for the witness, you know, where you can investigate everything around you and see if it's separate from you, and you know, you can start to experience oneness that way. But undividedness, if there's anything unresolved in us that creates any kind of inner conflict, it's eventually it's going to be driving us, and it's going to get in the way. Like I said, you can't transcend your way to embodiment. You can only embody your way to embodiment. And that's the truth. So if you found this video helpful, feel free to leave a like and subscribe. And if you have any questions or comments for me, you can feel free to leave them below. Now, thank you so much for joining me today.